Altitude frontispiece. Conway paused. A hell of a lot you know about altitude records, fella. Want to fly this one, for a change? Altitude by Leland Jamieson, illustrated by William Moult. A free balloon expert soars high indeed, a vivid and authentic story by an officer of the Army Air Service. The silver sphere that was the Marie IV, the balloon of all balloons to Captain Conway, tugged lightly at the sandbags that held her to the floor. A faint chill breeze whipped around the corner of the open hangar and swayed her gently. The grace of the oscillations suggested an eagerness to tear away from the moorings that lay in a neat square below her basket. Big beyond comparison with other free balloons, she was an object of affection from airmen. She was not just a free balloon, a fabrication of cloth and rope and wicker, filled with hydrogen. She was the Marie IV. Her name was painted in tall blue letters on her side beneath the netting, and men spoke of her by name. To those familiar with her exploits, she had a definite personality, as inanimate things may often have. In the semi-gloom inside the hangar, 2 men were working. Conway, the larger of these men, was standing in the wicker car of the balloon. Kissner, his aide on many past occasions, knelt upon the floor and sorted paraphernalia, pausing, now and then, to stand and pass some object up to Conway. It was cold, the mercury of the thermometer in the basket huddled in the tube at 10 degrees above zero. Both men wore heavy fur-lined flying clothes, though only Conway was going on the flight. Their hands were mittened and were huge, like paws. Their feet were encased in awkward fleece-lined moccasins. Kissner lifted a small steel cylinder, upon which was attached a parachute pack, and handed it to Conway. The larger man stepped to the opposite side of the wicker cage and tussled clumsily with the straps and lines that were meant to hold the cylinder in place against a framework on the outside of the car. His hands were all thumbs, and he had difficulty. Finally, in exasperation, he turned to Kissner. "Here, fella, give me a hand. I've got too many mittens." "Take him off," Kissner suggested gravely, stepping around the basket. "You can't tie knots in a piece of rope with 2 thumbs." Aiding one another, the 2 accomplished the task, and Kissner turned back to sorting the various lines and gear on the floor. An automobile drew to a stop just within the doorway of the hangar, and another man, also dressed in flying clothes, the best protection from the cold, climbed out. Opening the rear door of the car, he removed 3 small, black rectangular boxes. Handling them with infinite care, he walked toward the Marie IV. Conway saw him coming and turned to Kissner. "Here comes Welkfern with our instruments. We're just about all set now." The man named Welkfern called, as he approached the balloon, "You guys must have been working all night, to be out here this time of day. How you making out?" "Fine," Conway replied. "Set those barographs down and give us a hand here." "What did the jeweler say?" "I guess he got the oil off all right." "Should have," said Welkfern. "Told me he worked all night on 'em. Got a fine day for a trip like this, eh? Awful cold down here, though. Say, Charlie Redfern ran into a culvert with that big new car of his last night. Saw the wreck a while ago as I was going to town. Tore her up mighty bad. Charlie didn't have it paid for either. Don't know what he's brought everything back from town, did you?" Conway interrupted. "Yeah, everything you sent." "Hello, Kissner. Got you working. How come?" "Say, Con, what time are you going to take off? Morning papers carried a story on you and the Marie. There's going to be a crowd out to see you shove off. I was talking to that skinny little reporter that covers the field on this kind of stuff. He was looking for you to get a write-up, and he wants to get a yarn and some pictures for a full page for Sunday. Told him you're busy as hell and that he'd get run off the place if he showed up out here, but he said, 'Got to do it, Lieutenant, guess I better get out there right afternoon and see the captain. I'm going to get me a club and wait for him. Say, Kiss, how about a cigarette?' You through talking?" Conway grinned. "Kissner's got a lot to do down there before I take off. How about doing a little work yourself?" "Work?" Indignantly. "Say, who was it got up at 7 o'clock this morning and drove 30 miles to get those barographs? Battery frozen, too, had to crank the bus by hand. Nearly froze to death. Just got the seat warmed up as I was driving up to the hangar, hand me those instruments," Conway interrupted. "Be careful with them too." Welkfern handed the black boxes up, one at a time. Then he turned and squatted beside Kistner, busied himself with the adjustment of a sand release on an empty sandbag. Occasionally Kistner or Welkfern looked up and directed some question at Conway, queried this or that in connection with the preparation for the flight. Kistner was all engaged with the work he had to do. Welkfern, on the other hand, kept up a running conversation. From time to time he made some friendly jest about Conway's ability as a balloonist. "Ought to get the record this time," Welkfern called. "Tried it 3 times now, had lots of practice trying to get it. Better make it on this trip, you'll be running out of excuses pretty soon." Conway paused, stopped his work and stood with mittened hands upon his hips. "A hell of a lot you know about altitude records, fella. Want to fly this one, for a change?" "I'll let you." "Guess not this time. Marie and I don't get along so well. I haven't got the master's touch." And Welkfern laughed. "Say, Con, I'll order flowers this afternoon. Got a friend in town who's a florist. I can get 'em cheap," he added. "I'm supposed to laugh at that, I guess," Conway said to Kistner. Then to Welkfern, "Little stale this morning, son." Kistner seemed annoyed. "You talk like a fool, Welk," he said soberly. "You talk like that, and something might happen." "Don't see any harm in it," Welkfern replied defensively. "No harm meant, you don't need to get sore about it." He slipped into a moody silence. Kistner climbed into the basket to help Conway with the equipment there. For 2 hours the 3 men worked, saying little. The sun crawled up in the east and stood almost overhead, but it brought no warmth as it climbed. When the preparations for the flight were almost completed, Conway sent Welkfern down to headquarters on an errand. Welkfern was gone almost an hour, and when he returned Conway yelled to him, "Hey, fella, where's my clock?" "Clock?" Welkfern asked blankly. "Search me, didn't know you sent a clock." Conway paused. "Sure, I sent one. Send it with the barographs to have the oil cleaned out of it." "Use another one," Welkfern suggested. "I'll get one out of another balloon." "Use another one?" Kistner asked sourly. "Gosh, I thought you knew more than that. Con's got to have a clock that's dry, no oil inside of it, or the oil'll get stiff up high where it's cold, and the clock'll freeze. He's got to have that clock running to tell him when it's time to start back down. He's got oxygen for an hour and a half, he's got to save enough oxygen to get back down to 15,000 feet, where he can breathe air again. If the clock stops up there and he uses up all his oxygen, not knowing when the time'll be up, he'll suffocate before he gets back down." Conway laughed at Kistner's agitation. "You better go back to town and get it," Kistner said. "Con's got to have it. And don't waste any time." "I don't think he's got time enough now," Conway said dryly. "I'm going to take off right after lunch, and Welk might get to talking downtown and not get back in time." Welk?" Welkfern looked up at the 2 men in the basket a moment, then at the floor. He tried to grin. "I'll get your damn clock," he said hastily. He ran to the automobile, climbed in. Gears clashed for a moment, and he was gone. "Good scout, Welkfern," Conway said to Kistner. "Just young and inexperienced. Means everything fine. Just like a woman, though, always talking. Gets started to talking and forgets everything else. He doesn't remember it, but I told him yesterday about that clock. Someday he'll have to make a parachute jump from a balloon. If there's anybody else in the basket, Welk'll get started talking on the way down and forget to pull his ripcord." Conway was scheduled to begin his flight at 1 o'clock that afternoon. He could not well delay it beyond 2:30 because, in doing so, he ran the risk of landing his balloon in strange country after night with the consequent hazard of being killed, or, if his parachute was resorted to, of losing the balloon. The flight had been planned with infinite attention to detail in equipment and the weather. The equipment had been ready for a month, but the weather until now had made the flight impossible. Captain Conway wanted to be the man who had gone to the highest point up ever attained by man, and he had made of that desire a lifelong ambition. For 3 years after entering the service he had studied and trained and worked unceasingly. At the end of that time he took a small balloon and flew it as high as he could go without oxygen, some 26,000 feet. That was the beginning of a series of flights, each a little higher. The result of this procedure was that after 10 years in the service, Conway knew more about balloons and high-altitude balloon flying than any man had ever known before. But still, he didn't hold the record. He had held it, to be sure, but each time he got it in his grasp some other man, in a balloon or airplane, went up a few feet higher. Conway wanted to stop that. He wanted to go so high that his record would stand until someone built a bigger balloon than his and learned to fly it better than he could fly the Marie. Conway and Kistner were through with the balloon by 12 o'clock, but now, to occupy their time, they made another inspection of the basket, checked every instrument carefully, examined the sound releases, the barographs and radio. There was nothing more to do, and they drove back to the club and went to lunch, trying to calm their excitement and activity, as the time for the takeoff drew nearer. From the flying field to Greenberg was about 15 miles. A car like Welkfern's should have been able to traverse the distance in 20 minutes, or 30 at the most. Conway expected Welkfern back within an hour, and when he returned to the balloon hangar after lunch he looked around for Welkfern's car, but could not find it. The sergeant left with the balloon had seen nothing of Welkfern. "That little cuss," said Kistner angrily. "I wonder where he is?" Conway did not reply. He was looking appraisingly at the sky, as if he saw it now for the first time that day. High clouds were pushing rapidly in from the southwest. There had been no sign of them that morning, now they had slid well overhead. The sun's rays were dimming slowly, would be obscured soon. Already the shadow of the hangar was blurred. "Snow tomorrow, Kiss," said Conway. "If it warms up, it'll rain. We're in for a bad stretch of weather, there are the signs." Pointing. "Something's happened to Welkfern," Kistner declared. "It's 1:30. He's had plenty of time, something's happened to him." Conway stepped briskly out to where he could view the road that led to the balloon hangar, examined the road carefully, looking for Welkfern's car approaching. No car was in sight. He returned to the doorway of the hangar, waited briefly, then went out again. Still Welkfern did not appear. "If he doesn't hurry up, you can't go," Kistner muttered angrily. "He knows better than to delay like this." Conway studied the sky in silence. He finally shook his head. "Say, Kiss, call the jeweler, find out if Welkfern's been there. Why didn't we think of that before?" Conway stood by and listened while Kistner called his number. He looked at his watch, 1:37. "Hasn't been there?" he heard Kistner question. "Haven't seen him? What the hell?" "Well, when he comes in there, tell him we're waiting for that clock." Welkfern left Conway and Kistner in a mood of anger with himself. He realized that the clock was necessary for the flight. He hadn't thought of it before, a clock freezing in the air, but he could readily see, now that Kistner had explained it, that Conway ran a risk of death if his timepiece failed him on the flight. And Welkfern knew Conway well enough to know that the balloonist would take off without the clock rather than postpone the trip. Well, he'd get it there in time. Conway wanted to take off at 1 o'clock, which gave Welkfern a few minutes more than an hour to make the trip. He drove furiously toward Greenberg, holding the car at its greatest speed, slowing only slightly for the turns. He knew that he could make the trip, with luck, in 50 minutes, even less than that. He wanted a good margin of time on the return trip. Conway had always laughed at him for talking constantly and forgetting things, and he knew that the other man had been justified in doing so. Welkfern had come some 3 miles toward Greenberg when he was startled by a blatant siren just behind him. He pulled carefully to the side of the road, holding his speed, to let the other vehicle pass, but the sound persisted. Then he saw, through the window in the rear, a motorcycle policeman riding close behind and to the side. He had a crazy impulse to cut suddenly across the road, to wreck the officer's machine, but he realized the idiocy of that procedure and slowed angrily to a stop. The cop rode up alongside, rested his foot leisurely on the running board of Welkfern's car. "Nice speedway here, ain't it?" Acidly. What's the idea of stopping me? Welkfern barked in reply. I'm going to town on official business, you can't stop me like this. I'm in a hurry. Can't stop ya? That's too bad. You ain't on the reservation now, buddy. You're on the state highway, and you're speedin' something awful. I'll have your job. Instantly he wished he had been silent. The policeman looked at him appraisingly, then smirked. You couldn't hold it. Listen, mister, Welkfern said appeasingly, trying to hurry the matter, a friend of mine's liable to get killed if I don't get back to the field in a hurry. Can't I sign a bond and then go on? That's better. Yeah, you can sign a bond. He produced it, filled it out, and Welkfern signed it hurriedly. I'm going into town behind ya, the cop continued. Better not go no faster 'n the law allows, or you can't sign a bond next time. Welkfern drove ahead at what seemed to him a snail's pace, the cop following at a distance. In town at last, and free of the policeman, Welkfern opened up his car and tore through traffic toward the jeweler's place. Twice he was whistled at by traffic officers, but both times he got away. He thought, mirthlessly, I'll be afraid to come to town for a month after this ride. Ill luck pursued him, as it often does when haste is most essential. Rounding a corner at 30 miles an hour, he was suddenly confronted by a huge truck that almost blocked the street. He tried to dodge through, thought he had made it. There was a crash, his car careened drunkenly and skidded to a stop. A rear wheel lay splintered on the pavement, the axle of the car was resting on the curb. Frontispiece he was suddenly confronted by a huge truck. He tried to dodge through. There was a crash, and his car careened drunkenly. It required 10 precious minutes to pacify the truckman. Welkfern was made to fill out a card, giving his name and address and phone number. At last he was allowed to go, and he ran frantically to the store. He burst in and asked, breathlessly, for the clock. Somebody just called about you, the jeweler told him. Seemed like he was sore about something. I told him you hadn't been here, and he said for you to hurry up, that they were waiting for you out there. Good. If he'll only wait, everything'll be all right. If he takes off without this clock, there'll be hell to pay. He grabbed the instrument and hurried out. He found a cab and gave the driver directions, offering a double rate for speed. But on the highway the cab moved along at a speed within the limits of law. Looking back, Welkfern saw the same motorcycle cop who had detained him earlier riding steadily along 100 yards behind. The cab left the highway and entered the reservation. The driver shoved the throttle down now, and in less than a minute more turned onto the road that led to the balloon hangar. And at that moment Welkfern saw the Marie, gray and stately against the haze, rise slowly in the air. With the weather all against him if his flight should be delayed, Conway decided, at 2 o'clock, to fly the Marie 4 into the sub-zero temperatures of the upper air with an ordinary clock. Kistner tried in every way to dissuade him, but without success. Kistner persisted, like a mother who argues with a wayward son, until the other man turned on him impatiently. I know what I'm about. Conway snapped. Get the crew and put the Marie outside. If I don't go today I'll not have another chance before spring. But see here, Con, Kistner said desperately. That clock'll stop and you'll run out of oxygen up there. You'll die before you can get down. Damn it, you don't have to kill yourself trying to get that record. But Kistner saw that Conway was in earnest and he reluctantly put the crew to work. They hauled the balloon outside the hangar, took the place of the sandbags that had held it to the ground. Conway came presently and shoved through the crowd of curious people, climbed into the basket and put on his fur-lined helmet and his parachute. He made a last-minute inspection of the oxygen equipment and spoke quietly to Kistner, who stood close by. He was in a good humor now that the flight was definitely underway. Tell that little cuss I'm going to break his neck when I get down, he said, referring to Welkfern. Going to get a dub and run him all over this flying field. Kistner nodded gravely. He was in no mood for joking. He was tempted to try again to persuade Conway to postpone the flight, but he knew that it was useless. He reached up and grasped the furry paw that was extended down to him. Good luck, old man, he said, keeping his voice steady with difficulty. Call me up as soon as you get down and I'll come after you. But Conway didn't notice his agitation. Thanks, he replied absently. The Marie took off for altitude at 2:23 that afternoon. The wind had died down during the day from a fitful, biting breeze to a dead calm. Overhead the clouds had thickened perceptibly. The weather was ideal. Cold air, dry and heavy, the balloon would go up into the higher reaches in a steady climb that would take it to 40,000 feet within an hour, or sooner, if Conway wanted it. But Conway had no particular desire for speed. Rather, he wanted to go up slowly so that the effects of the change of atmospheric pressure on his body would not be acutely uncomfortable. He wanted to go up slowly, also, so that he might study the conditions of the air at varying elevations. When once at the top of his climb, with the record his, he wanted to remain there several minutes, as long as his oxygen supply would permit, to study the conditions there. For while he wanted the altitude record, he also wanted to make his flight of value to other flyers. He had changed his clothes at noon, and now wore garments that were heated by electricity from the battery in the basket. His oxygen mask, which he would put on when rarefied air was reached, was heated also, and his goggles likewise. His helmet was equipped with earphones, and in the wicker cage a radio was rigged to bring in entertainment from the ground when he was flying high above the earth. The Marie drifted lazily into the air, looking, from the ground, like a huge gray soap bubble on which a drop of water clung. Conway stood at the rim of his tiny car and watched the earth drop slowly away below. He was watching nothing in particular, seeing the crowd and the flying field and Greenberg through the haze abstractedly. He noticed an automobile, a cab whose vivid color was its trademark, race along the road toward the balloon hangar. It came at last to the crowd, broke through the cordon of soldiers that had surrounded the Marie on the ground, raced to a spot directly underneath the balloon. A figure leaped out, waved frantically. Conway did not recognize the car as Welkfern's. He had been glancing at the road occasionally, hoping that the other man would arrive at the field in time. He knew the dangers of going into the cold of high altitudes with an oily clock, and he planned, if Welkfern came in time, to return to Earth to get the other timepiece. He watched the waving figure for a moment and thought, must be that fool reporter. Too late even for a picture. The mottled earth dimmed slowly through the haze as the Marie went skyward. Conway reached for his collar clumsily with his mittened fingers and adjusted the fur around his throat. Idly he watched a lone buzzard circle in the bleak and forlorn cold at 2,000 feet. Slowly the balloon reached a level with the bird, went on up until Conway lost sight of the wheeling speck of black. The thermometer in the basket registered 5 degrees above zero, not cold, in comparison with the cold that would be encountered in the upper air, but cold enough that Conway's face felt drawn and hard and bitten. In a few minutes he would put his face mask on. At 5,000 feet the haze was denser. He could still see the earth below, but faintly now. The flying field stood out dimly from the other land surrounding it, but the giant hangar in its center seemed to fade imperceptibly into the haze. The radio brought a rakish melody faintly to the earphones. The music soothed Conway, though if he had listened to it on the ground he would have turned to something else. It made him forget to some extent the loneliness of the infinity that stretched away above him. The earth was invisible now. At 15,000 feet the temperature had dropped to 5 degrees below. Conway put on his mask and adjusted it. His goggles began to fog and, reaching down, he turned on his batteries, then, picking up his log sheet, made an entry, 4 volts, much colder. The air was becoming thinner, lighter. There was less oxygen to breathe, and he found himself sucking in the icy air in greedy gasps. Stooping, he twisted a valve that opened an oxygen tank. After that his breath came normally. An airman going rapidly aloft to great altitudes sometimes experiences an acute discomfort called, in aviation parlance, bends, or sometimes rickets. These bends may produce pains behind the flyer's ears, like mastoiditis, or an apparent buzzing in the ears and head. If prolonged these pains become unbearable. Conway suffered from this trouble now, and slowed the progress of the balloon until his body could become accustomed to the change in pressure of the air. At 16,000 feet the Marie entered the first layer of clouds. The mist hugged tight around the basket, whereas before, when in clear air, Conway had been able to see a distance of 50 miles, he could scarcely see 10 feet now. The feeling of isolation and aloneness was even more pronounced. The temperature was 15 degrees below, yet snow filtered down from the clouds above, past Conway slowly. Gradually the rounded top of the huge bag was covered with snow, a perceptible weight to carry into the rarefied air as the flight progressed. Conway spilled more sand from his ballast bags, a thin yellow stream of grains that fell away like beads of amber glass. At 20,000 feet the Marie lifted herself out of the clouds and into clear sunshine. The sky here was a deep and lifeless blue. Clouds stretched out in all directions, seemingly into infinity, low ridge after low ridge, with valleys in between, a flat plain of brilliantly white mist that was painful to the eye. Above these clouds there was no haze, the sun was intense, yet cold, unfriendly. It was 10 minutes until 3 o'clock. The radio was still bringing in music from an invisible, distant world. The bends grew less painful as the minutes passed. But Conway's body was gradually growing numb from the lack of pressure on it, a normal phenomenon at extremely high altitudes. Some men may go to 40,000 feet before this sets in, others feel it coming on at 30,000. Conway began to suffer from it at 35. He felt no cold, no pain, his body seemed to rest comfortably, with a kind of sensuous inertia that lulled him toward a seductive semi-consciousness. He tried to fight this feeling, tried to rouse himself. He knew its symptoms and its dangers, in its final form a few minutes of complete paralysis, then sleep. The oxygen would feed his lungs until it became exhausted, then sleep would carry him to death in the thin, anemic air 8 miles above the earth. He had felt that way on other flights, although less so than now. And he still had 9,000 feet to go before the record would be safely his. The mercury in the thermometer had tumbled down to 29 below. There was a sudden suffocating feeling in Conway's lungs. Quickly he changed from the first oxygen tank to the second, then, with a knife that dangled on a string inside the basket he cut the rubber tubing of the first tank and hacked at the lashings that protruded into the car. The empty cylinder fell silently away, the balloon lunged upward gently, hesitated with a slight jerk, then went up again. Conway was dimly conscious that his radio was silent. He tuned it carefully, examined it at length without success. Finally he leaned over the side of the basket and looked down at the antenna, it was gone. Slowly he scrawled on his log, "Sill dropped. Broke antenna off, no more music." He busied himself for some minutes with entries in his log, writing now in an unsteady hand, clumsily. He set down the time shown on the clock and the voltage being drawn from his batteries, anything he saw or anything he thought about recording to occupy his mind. Insidiously the numbness grew upon his body. He seemed unable to see his instruments clearly, he was like a drunken man, his vision blurred. Doggedly he shook his head, trying thus to clear his sight. His senses seemed all befuddled. Foolhardy though he knew the expenditure of energy to be, for he was not cold, he took to waving his mittened hands, clapping them together gently, as a freezing man might do when slipping into a fatal stupor in the cold. But that did no good, and he took up his pencil again and tried to make another entry in his log. His mind seemed to work in vagrant opposition to his will, disobeying reason and experience. He read his altimeter and his clock and thermometer. These readings he put down carefully, with painful labor. The altimeter registered 38,000 feet, it was 3:20 by the clock, the temperature was down to 34 below. He found the line on the log below where his last entry had been made. There was something distantly familiar about the figures already there and the ones he was trying to write. He fumbled in his mind to recall the connection, failed. Time passed now in endless throbs. His legs felt numb, his feet like slugs of lead that hung inside his fur-lined moccasins in curious detachment from his body. With difficulty now he made new figures on the paper. Wearily he glanced at other entries and wondered where he had seen them. He glanced at all his instruments and back to the log once more. Slowly realization came to him. There were 3 entries that gave the time of day as 3:20. The clock, also, said 3:20. He puzzled that, finally, through a blur, knew that the clock had stopped. He stared out into space, trying to collect his wits, incredulous. The oil, he thought. How long ago? The altimeter registered 41,000 feet. He knew, dimly, that he must hurry, but there was no conscious fear among his muddled thoughts. Suddenly there was that suffocation in his lungs. He changed to the third cylinder of oxygen, his movements heavy. It was later than he had thought, the time was now almost too short. Speed. Conway dropped the remainder of his sand, cut away the second cylinder to lighten the balloon still further. His movements were sluggish, and he fumbled stupidly. The paralysis was moving upward in his body, was seeping into his arms already, would soon sweep up and touch his sight and hearing and his brain. His foggy mind worked incoherently. Up 2,000 more. Down 20,000, the air was thick down there. 30 minutes on the last tank. Never make it. Go down now. But a dogged disregard for safety made him go ahead. Vaguely he remembered dropping his batteries to lighten the balloon still more. Speed. If he got caught up there without oxygen, he'd be dead before he could get down. The altimeter registered 42. He reached for the valve cord with clownish awkwardness, then released it. He'd go on up. His mind worked things out in blurred succession as the needle crept slowly around the dial. A free balloon is equipped with a rip panel in its top, which, when torn free, allows a complete deflation of the bag. The loss of gas permits the cloth of the bottom portion of the balloon to fold back within the upper portion, forming in that way an enormous cap, umbrella-like, over which the netting hangs. The netting holds this cap in place, and the balloon parachutes to earth. The descent is rapid. The needle of the altimeter paused at 43,000 as the nerves in Conway's muscles died. He found himself unable to grasp the valve cord with his hands. His arms were like wooden stakes, detached entirely from his shoulders. He could still hear and see, although there was a roaring in his brain. The balloon had stopped its climb, had reached its peak, would go no farther. Conway realized that death was near. Unable to pull the cord that would release the gas, helpless at an altitude where life would perish without oxygen, he would be snuffed out in a few quick minutes when the last cylinder was empty. The ripcord and the valve cord dangled temptingly in the basket just in front of him. Either would have served his purpose, would have sent the balloon back to earth again. But he could not control his muscles enough to pull either one of them. Every muscle in his arms and legs was uncontrollable. Only his head and neck were still unparalyzed. There came that suffocating feeling now again. The tank was almost empty, would be gone in one more breath. Desperately, with strength born of panic, he sucked his lungs full. Then he bent his neck and raked his face against a rope that extended upward from the corner of the basket. His lungs seemed bursting, the mask still clung tenaciously on his face. He raked again, a grotesque movement, and the mask came halfway off. His head swam, reeled crazily. He wanted air, he had to breathe. He set his teeth hard over the cord that extended to the rip panel, bit hard down upon it, tried to jerk it with his head. He lost his balance, crumpled forward and lay, unconscious, on the basket floor. In the death-like silence of the upper air the rasping sigh of escaping hydrogen echoed hollowly. The huge bag of the Marie 4 crumpled slowly, collapsed, the bottom portion folding upward in the netting. It started down, gaining momentum rapidly. Air, passing through the ropes and rigging of the balloon, turned to howling, shrieks as speed was gathered. The Marie fell 3,000 feet while the hydrogen was going out. When the bag was empty it should have parachuted, but it did not. It folded up into a knot in the apex of the netting, like a huge fist, gnarled and bulging on one side. Helpless from the force of gravity, the derelict was falling at a speed of 200 miles an hour, the cloth and netting whipping violently upward in a high-flung streamer. The figure in the bottom of the basket lay as it had fallen, crumpled grotesquely. The balloon plunged earthward at a constant speed now. Air resistance was so great that it could gain no greater velocity. As it descended and reached denser air it even slowed a trifle, but still fell like a rock nearly 3 miles a minute. The flat plane of the clouds seemed to lift steadily up toward the basket of the balloon itself seemed to drop but slowly. Then, at 20,000 feet, the clouds enveloped it and there was no trace left of where the falling derelict had gone. Kistner and Welkfern, waiting at the club for hours now, were silent as the minutes passed and brought no word of Conway. At first there had been tense moments of angry denunciation from Kistner, a hysterical venting of his fears and feelings of impending evil. Welkfern realized fully now the gravity of his failure to return in time with the clock. At first he made explanations hotly, told of his experiences in town, tried to pacify and allay Kistner's agitation, but the other man would not listen. They waited anxiously until the time when Conway should have returned to Earth again. They knew how much oxygen he carried, how long it would supply him, and when the time was up, they drove silently from the club to the balloon hangar and waited there, scanning the sky and hoping desperately to see the balloon descending near at hand, yet knowing that winds in the upper air were apt to drift the bag many miles before it returned to Earth. Time passed, and no word came of it. They waited now apathetically. They were sure that Conway was dead, and Kistner blamed Welkfern bitterly. "Why are we waiting here?" Welkfern asked woodenly. "The balloon won't come down around here, the wind will drift it. All kinds of winds up there. Can't tell where it went. One wind might drift it one way, then up a little higher another wind might blow it back. Anyhow," suddenly Welkfern cried eagerly, "Kistner, look." He pointed up as he spoke, and finally Kistner saw a speck of gray above another speck of dark, 3 or 4 miles to the east. These specks fell together, rapidly, in a straight line earthward. Kistner, running to his car, obtained binoculars, focused them quickly. The basket of the balloon stood out quite plainly through the glass, the bag above it twisted hopelessly in the netting. There was no one in the car, and for a moment Kistner hoped that Conway had left his craft when higher up, was somewhere now coming down dangling on his parachute. The wreck hurtled toward the earth. Kistner judged that it was at 6,000 feet when he first saw it. It reached 4, then 3, was plainer to be seen as it descended. Frontispiece the figure seemed to hang a moment on the rim, seemed to try to struggle free, then toppled from the car. Then something lifted itself up inside the basket, seemed to hang a moment on the rim. It moved. Kistner saw it clearly. Then it sank again. The Marie was almost to the ground, 2,000 feet, dropping at 150 miles an hour. The figure rose again, dully, lethargically. Slowly it climbed up higher in the basket, seemed to try to struggle free. It seemed to slump again, but rose a moment later, and toppled from the car, falling for a time in line with the plunging wreckage. Something white bubbled up above it, checked its fall. Lazily it drifted down. The balloon struck the ground 400 feet below. Before the parachute had come to Earth, Kistner and Welkfern rode frantically along a road toward where it would come down. 6 minutes later they were lifting Conway carefully into the car. Nearer dead than alive, he fainted as they put him in. Late that evening Conway, the altitude record holder of the world, and Kistner and Welkfern sat before a roaring fire in the club. The balloonist was slightly pale, and was weakened from exposure. He should have been in bed recuperating, but his excitement had not waned, and he was not sleepy. From time to time he sucked deep breaths of air hungrily, held them in his lungs, and let them go. "Can't explain it all," he said. "Can't see how it happened." "What's the last thing you remember?" Kistner asked. "That clock. I saw 3 entries on my log, all the same. It woke me up a little, scared me. After that I don't recall what happened. Must have been out on my feet, don't recall a thing. How I pulled the ripcord of the balloon I can't see. When I came to, we were coming down like a brick, she hadn't parachuted normally at all. I saw the cloth of the bag rolled up in a ball in the top of the netting, just enough to slow us up a little. By the time I got my mind working, we must have been down low, I didn't see the altimeter. Just remember thinking, big boy, you gotta jump. Had a hard time getting out, too, just did make it. Kept thinking, must be awful near the ground. Hurry. Hurry. Well, you saw me come over the side. Good thing she didn't parachute just right up there," Kistner pointed out. "Your oxygen tanks were empty, if you hadn't come down fast, you'd have died before the balloon got down where the air was dense enough that you could breathe." He puzzled the matter a moment, shook his head. "Don't see how you did it, Con." Well, see what I put on the log when I was up there, Conway said tiredly. Say, Welk, you run over and get the log. We'll have a look at it. Welkver nodded and arose, pulled on his overcoat. He started toward the door, and Conway called after him, grinning, "Don't be gone long, Welk, don't get to talking on the way." Transcriber's note: this story appeared in the March 1929 issue of Blue Book magazine. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Altitude updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the General Terms of Use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty. Disclaimer of damages except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you ASIS, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see Sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a nonprofit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116-801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact. Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.